Welcome to the John Malone Show. Today, I wanted to talk about the Joe Rogan Podcast. If you haven't seen today's episode, it's a wonderful show. He's got Dr. Sanjay Gupta on. And this should have happened a long time ago. This is probably one of the best dialogues I've seen talking about COVID and the vaccination and remedies for COVID. So if you've not seen it, it's on Spotify, the Joe Rogan Show. The Joe Rogan Experience, and Dr. Sanjay Gupta from CNN. And it's just a wonderful interview because it's 3 hours long. So they get really in-depth conversation, and it's very nuanced. So I think a lot of questions that a lot of us had were answered. There's some that weren't, but that's okay. I think they covered the majority of the things that I wanted to hear personally myself. And Joe has brought up several times in the past, people's health and how we need to be healthier, is just in general. But I thought about that, and I know Joe's financial situation. He doesn't really have to worry about these things. He eats a lot of elk meat and takes a lot of vitamins and works out a lot. And not everybody has access to these things. And they talk about it a little bit, but don't talk about the solution. And that's where I get frustrated. I wish that Joe would get together with some of his friends and like talk about this, like have like a roundtable conversation, like influential people, like you and Dave Chappelle and just a few other people, Laird Hamilton maybe, people in the kind of in that industry, Jocko, get together in a roundtable and say, like, what do we think, what do we know, and have Sanjay in this roundtable conversation and come up with a solution, right? Because I kind of have one, and so we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I know that Jon Stewart went in front of Congress or Senate and really fought for the people that had gotten any kind of diseases, as far as lung issues and things from 9/11, and working on the site, right, for the first responders that have gotten cancer or any kind of respiratory illness from working at the 9/11 at Ground Zero. And so he put his money where his mouth was, right? And he really fought and still fights, I think, to this day, to get these people, medical attention and medical help and benefits for their family and stuff like that. So he's taken his fame, and literally went to Congress and Senate and said, this is what I want to see happen. And he didn't back down. So if Joe thinks everybody needs to get healthy, well, how do we fix that? Right? Because not everybody has the money to eat healthy. There's a great documentary many years ago called Food Inc. And one of the families that was in there was a very low income family. And you got to watch this. So I'm probably going to chop this up pretty bad. But essentially the story is this family who doesn't have a lot of income. The father has to take medicine for his heart. But he also has to feed his family, right? And I think it's 3 children or something like that. So 4 or 5 people he's got to feed. If he takes his medicine, then he can only afford this much every month for food. So they're constantly going through fast food drive-thrus for every meal. Right? Because even when you go to some of the fast food places, even to eat salad, like a grilled chicken salad is more expensive sometimes than a hamburger meal. Right? So these people are not forced, but they're in a situation where it's financially feasible for them to eat burger and fry and soda. That's the money that they have. So if they eat healthy, he doesn't have to take the medicine, right? It's a real dilemma. If they eat healthy, they don't have to take the heart medication, because then they wouldn't have the blood pressure issues and don't have the sodium intake and a lot of these things, right? All things that we all know, right? So you eat more inflammatory food, you will have body function issues. But that money that they have is not enough to go out to the grocery store and buy a rotisserie chicken and fresh Brussels sprouts and broccoli or whatever, right? They don't have the money for that. So it's cheaper for them, where they live and whatever state this, I think it was California. The money that they had, and they get really in depth in this. Was only enough to get drive through. Okay, we know this for a lot of people. This happens. There's a TV show, Malcolm in the Middle, right? It's a Midwestern family in, I think, Illinois or Indiana, and very low income family, and they bring home drive through food every night, right? And the joke is whoever brings home the food, whether it's the children or the parents, they say, "I made dinner." No, they didn't. It was drive through or fast food. So this, unfortunately, is the situation for a lot of people. So how do we fix that? Do we subsidize this? Do we give people a stipend? So put everybody on food stamps? Because I was asking a friend of mine who I know is currently getting food stamps, and she said she's only getting $250 a month. That's not a lot of money. So what does $250 a month buy you? And she lives in Section 8 housing, and has a disability. So what does that buy you? A lot of frozen dinners, which are a lot of them are high in sodium, right? So a lot of frozen pizza, a lot of frozen dinners, a lot of ramen noodles. That's the life that a lot of people are forced to live with. So do we subsidize it and give them more money so they can eat healthier, right? So they can eat more whole food style foods, fresh meat, fresh produce, fresh vegetables. Because I'd asked her, what is she allowed to buy, with her benefits? And she said, "Oh, I can buy candy and soda and chips." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" Well, that's certainly not helping. If you're able to buy junk food and pastries and it's just a lot of processed food, and we know a lot of that is not good for us. In moderation is one thing. For those of us who don't have to worry about this, moderation means something completely different for us than it does a lot of other people. I'm a northern raised boy, right? I'm originally from Hershey, Pennsylvania, although I was raised in Nashville, Tennessee. But being originally from Pennsylvania, uh, grew up in Hershey, so a lot of chocolate. Also had a lot of Tasty Cakes is the name of the company, and they have what's called a butterscotch crimpet, and it's a spongy kind of pastry cake with a butterscotch icing on top. So I still eat those, all right, because I'm kind of a northern boy at heart. I guess I'm a damn Yankee, but I spent more of my adult life, or uh, the time that I was raised, was here. So we moved here when I was a kid. But I eat that in moderation, like maybe once or twice a month is a little treat to myself. Kind of reminds me of like grandmother's cooking or something like that, right? So it kind of fills my heart and my belly, more my heart. So, but a lot of people don't have those choices. A lot of people, a bag of Doritos or something like that is their lunch. I saw something on the news the other day where they were showing the school, and they didn't have a lot of money for uh, lunch for the kids, and they were giving them a hot dog, and it, like, not a hot dog on a bun or anything like that. It was just like a hot dog, and it looked like it was 2 days old or something like that, and way overcooked. Like that was the school lunch. That's disheartening. How these kids' minds, is supposed to stay focused on schoolwork when they're eating just a hot dog. I want to think it's like a hot dog and crackers. You'll have to look it up. You can Google it. School only has money to give hot dogs, but not everybody has these options to have good health. I know Joe takes like very expensive vitamins. I think the company's called On It or something like that. I can't afford those vitamins. The vitamins I take, my multivitamins, like $20. I get it from Amazon. But there are a lot of things that I've taken from Joe. He had Laird Hamilton on his show once, and he was talking about Laird has a Laird Hamilton superfood turmeric coffee creamer. And so I bought it based on that show. It was talking about inflammation. I've had some soreness throughout my life from playing hockey for 16 years and all my years in motorsports, running around the garage and pit road and climbing in and around and under cars. So, I'm 49, so starting to creak and snap, crackle, and pop everywhere. But I started taking this Laird Hamilton superfood and putting it in my coffee. And then Joe had somebody on that was talking about mushrooms. So I looked into that and thought for my migraines and things like this and brain function. So now I take a vitamin from a company called the Genius Company, and it's Genius Mushrooms. I've noticed a huge change in my cognitive thinking and taking that. Um, and then I switched from regular coffee to a mushroom based coffee from a company called Four Sigmatic, and you can look all these up on the internet. They sell them on Amazon. Uh, so I tried to make some major changes in my health, and at the beginning of COVID, Joe had Dr. Rhonda Patrick on his show, and she was talking about how many people were vitamin D deficient that were going into the hospital with COVID. And right, so we were all locked up and told to stay inside at the very beginning of the pandemic. So we're not getting vitamin D from its natural source of the sun. You can supplement it, in some foods, but if you're not going to be outside getting it in its purest form, best way to do that is to supplement. So I bought vitamin D pills because that's what Joe and Rhonda were talking to do. So there's been many times where Joe recommends something or says, I suggest this, or if I were you, and I do that. Doesn't mean I listen to everything he says, because like he says, he's just a stupid comedian, right? He's just a dumb monkey. But I sometimes get confused. I don't, but I think a lot of people do, where he's like, well, don't listen to me. I'm a stupid comedian. Well, when are we not supposed to listen to you, Joe? Because 1 minute you say, hey, I would suggest doing this. And then 2 minutes later, you're like, but don't listen to me. I'm just a stupid comedian. So which one is it? You can't have it both ways. I love and respect you very much, but be a little bit more thoughtful sometimes with some of these statements, okay? Because today it was great. He was talking about CNN and how he'd said that they were lying, saying that he was taking horse dewormer, which he wasn't. He was taking ivermectin. It was prescribed by his doctor, and he attributes that to him recovering from his from COVID a lot quicker. So I understand that, right? It was prescribed, and he talks about how it's been given to billions of people all around the world. And you got to watch the podcast. It's very informative. It's a great conversation. This is one of his best shows ever, in my opinion. So, especially now, like when we need it the most, when we're all at such great odds against each other, where we have team vaccine and team unvaccine. So it's just exhausting. So I feel like a lot of things got cleared up in this podcast today for a lot of people, and I hope people listen to both sides, because they both have very compelling opinions about these things. And I could even kind of see where Joe kind of was wavering a little bit. It started off a little rough, but then towards the end he was like, "Okay, well, you've given me some things to consider." Of course, being Joe, and I expect this out of him. At the end, he's like, "Yeah, but you still haven't completely changed my mind." So again, you got to watch it. It's a great show. But they were talking about the vaccine and talking about why you should get it versus not getting it, natural immunity and antibodies and antigens and all these things. And I'm excited about where things might come for us in the future, and having these antigen tests and antibody tests be more readily available. Because again, like Joe says, he gets these things done every day. Normal people don't have access to this stuff. And they even talked about some of the over the counter stuff is not all that accurate, right? So how do we work around some of these issues? That's where a lot of people stay home. A lot of people are wearing masks. Everybody's doing whatever they can to protect themselves. So they're getting vaccinated. They're wearing masks. Joe had on Bill Burr a while back, and they were talking about masks. And Joe said, "Oh, masks are for pussies." And he was kind of serious. I mean, he was joking, but you could tell the seriousness in him, and it even kind of ruffled Bill's feathers. But today, Sanjay Gupta brings on one of Joe Rogan's masks that he's selling. It's got the JRE logo on it. And Joe says, "Well, I wear a mask." Well, wait a minute. Just a few months ago, you were saying that people that wear masks are pussies. Make up your mind. And again, this is where I would wish you would say, this is where I'm being silly. And then, no, this is where you really need to listen to what I'm saying. So I wish we could figure out that line of delineation. With all that, they were talking about how we would eventually, I guess they're spending billions of dollars on making these tests more readily available to us. and he and Sanjay had a back and forth about, well, then what is my need to be vaccinated if I have antibodies and things like that? And I immediately just started thinking, because Joe talks about hunting and being manly and stuff like that. And I thought, and he also brought up a movie with Russell Crowe, The Gladiator. And that made me think, okay, wait a minute. Think of a castle, right? So before the first castle, what did people just live in, like a straw hut over in England? And so somebody had to build the first castle or something that looked like a castle. And I'm thinking of our bodies as being like a castle. So we start off as a hut, and then I'm going to fortify it with some stone and make a castle. And then, well, I've got a castle and it's strong, and a lot of people can't get in, but people are still getting up to the walls and they're throwing stuff over the walls. Well, let's dig a moat. So they build a moat around it, right? And then they put crocodiles in the moat. So defense, defense, defense. And then they built trebuchets, and then they were able to throw stuff over the water into the castle. And then they started building castles up on high mountains, right? And this is what we see in a lot of these movies, where you have a castle on the very highest mountaintop, and then they have a drawbridge that comes down, right? So when the invading horde comes, they lift up the drawbridge, and nobody can get in. A trebuchet won't throw anything far enough, and then to even stop the trebuchets on top of the castle, they have archers now, and they have trebuchets throwing fire and stuff down. So if you think of your body as that castle, right? You defense, defense, defense. So, eat healthy, take vitamins and supplements, get vaccinated, wear a mask. That's kind of the point that Sanjay was making, although I don't think it was clear enough. And so I feel like I needed to come on here and say, like, this is where this should have gone, right? Give a more layman's example of how to look at this, right? Because nobody was laughing at these people going, castles are for weenies, right? No, they were like, I got to go build one. So why aren't we doing that? Why have we become so divided? That's a topic for a different show and a different day. But you really got to watch this episode. Like I said, I revere Joe. I appreciate him. I love his comedy, and got turned onto his podcast and enjoy it. Kind of went off the rails for a while there for me, but I think he's starting to make a turn, because even he talked about today, he was fussing about CNN and saying how, like, almost all media was become a hyperbole and over dramatized, and he didn't know what to believe. And it's like, well, that's happening to these podcasts, Joe. He's blaming people for wanting to get clicks and likes, and, well, that's our business. Everything we do is based on clicks and likes. So we want to entertain people because we want them to keep coming back. Nobody says, I know this is what my viewers want, but that's not at all what I give them. So just be a little bit more mindful of your audience and what their expectations are. And again, go watch this episode. It's Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and it's on Spotify, and I'm sure there's clips available here on YouTube. But we need to come up with some more solutions for how we can fix this thing, because they were talking about, we can't wait. If we're in the middle of the pandemic, we can't wait to figure out how to get to herd immunity. We tried, it didn't work. People still wanted to go out. They still wanted to go to parties and things like that. So people kept spreading and spreading and spreading. The only way we knew how to control this as fast as we could was to vaccinate, because people just didn't want to stay home, right? We tried it for 14 days, but even during those 14 days in the very beginning, not 100% of the people stayed home. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to where we got, right? You had immediately a bunch of defiant people who were like, my civil liberties. Well, look where that's got us. A couple of people's civil liberties. I'm all for freedom. I'm all for peace. But come on, 2 weeks, we didn't even do that well. So let's try to come up with some solutions. Maybe we need to have some of these people do like Jon Stewart, get a bunch of thoughtful people who have money, who have more expertise, but also have a little bit more knowledge in health and things like that, that aren't government, right? So that's what I'm saying. Joe, you, Jocko, Laird Hamilton, Sanjay Gupta, you had a few other people on there that, whoever you want to have, come to a round table and figure out what do we do? what will work for everybody, right? Because if we give people more money so they can eat healthy, wouldn't that be less strain on like the medical facilities? Because there's a lot of people I imagine today that don't have health insurance, right? Or they don't have good health insurance. So if we're reducing the amount of times that people are going to the hospital because they're eating garbage, and does that offset, right? So if I give you $1,000 a month for groceries versus what is it costing us, every time you go to the hospital, is that thousands of dollars that we as taxpayers are having to pay? Let's square that circle. That would be my suggestion, is like, so we would have a version of universal basic income so people are fed, right? Because we already know in this country and around the world, there's many people who are malnourished. In the civilized world in 2021 going on 2022, we have so many people that are malnourished, and we don't have healthy drinking water all around the planet. So, it's hard to just sit there and say, hey, if people just got healthy. Not that easy, Joe. Not that easy. We don't all have your bankroll. So, um, think about those things. Sanjay tried to bring that up a little bit, but didn't really hit it home. So, just want to clarify that we're not all we don't all have $100 million from Spotify, buddy, and you deserve every penny of that. I'm not trying to say that. You provide a service. Was a worthy investment. You have brought probably millions of subscribers to their channel. I'm one of them, because I like you. I started my podcast. One of the reasons was because of you, in consultation with some of my friends who said this would be a great idea, something for you to do. I got the same boom mic you got. I bought the same mic that you have. So wanted to do the best and get the best. So anyway, I appreciate you. I appreciate today's show. Folks, go watch it. The Joe Rogan Experience with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Have a wonderful day. If you enjoy my podcast, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you next time on The John Malone Show.